Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the 1-800-GAMBLER Community United National Alliance podcast. My name is Luis Del Olbe, and as always, I am most honored to be with you today. And speaking of being honored, I have the honor of welcoming a guest today. A guest who has not only an inspirational, but a very motivational story about discovery and recovery. So let's bring her along. This way we can get to know her. Hello, Miss Christine.
Hello.
Well, listen, first up, please, I would like to thank you very much for being in this space. This is the 1-800-GAMBLER Community United National Alliance podcast. Now, of course, you know why you're here and what is that we do. So, to our audience, if you don't mind, can you please introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Palladino. I am a compulsive gambler in sustained recovery. So I grew up in Monmouth County, New Jersey. And my recovery journey started approximately a little over 8 years now.
Okay. Well, you know what? Can you tell us more about that part? Can you share with us what has been that journey that you've been on for the past 8 years?
Okay. Well, prior to my recovery, I'd say that gambling became for me, and it progressively became a problem. I'd say probably about 3 years prior to that. The last 3 years of me gambling, to my date, the last 3 years were out of control. At that time, I thought I was just bad with money, but I really didn't consider myself to have a problem gambling. I wanted to be in action. I was definitely an escape gambler. It totally got out of control for me when I had one disappointment. I was a first responder, specifically a 911 operator. And at that time, I really wanted to work for a specific town. And it just didn't happen. And after 7 years of doing everything I could as a part-timer, I didn't get it. Something else had happened when they let me know that they didn't need me working there anymore. The next thing that happened was I realized that the occasional trips to Atlantic City, to the casinos that I would take, it was easy for me to just log on and start gambling online. That wasn't enough. Over the course of time, it made me feel better. So if I did something good, or if I felt really good about something, or even if I was feeling bad, that would be my gateway. I'd start playing. I'd start, gambling online to where it became an everyday thing. I got another job, and at one, I continued to function. Okay. I worked. I also became a volunteer firefighter during this time. Thought that would kind of keep me occupied, and it did for a while. And eventually, that escape feeling, it just started to, where I would go to play just because. I would call out sick from work. I would get off. Yep, go ahead.
We have heard from other individuals in successful recovery or in recovery where they were saying, it's not about, the money or what it was about being in the action. And because of that, they say that they did not become aware that it was a problem, that, they didn't have an addiction. They have a money problem. They have a lack of money problem. Was that something like that for you?
Um, It was. I don't think it was even a consideration for me, honestly. I wanted to stay in the action. I like those little bonus rounds. It didn't stop with that. I was going to horse tracks. I was just overextending myself so much. Stay in action. And then there was times that I'd be up, and it would be up like I'd have 2 times the rent and I didn't care. I just wanted to keep playing. I really like those bonus rounds. They got me, and I play the bonus round. And I mean, I could place a $5 bet, and next thing I know, I'm only winning 5 cents on that bonus round, but it didn't matter because the next one was going to come. Like I was totally, totally out of touch. It
Would
made
you say
me
that that was the time of your life that you felt happy?
absolutely okay. I felt that at the time. Okay. Um, it was like a party and I never wanted it to end. It was a big party that I just didn't want to end. Every time, you know, I really, kind of liked the fact that I was so lucky. I became popular, you know, I could, help out my friends. We could go and have a great time, use all these comps, and I think I completely like mind boggles myself into thinking, well, me getting all these comps and, having a vice president of operations as my host and, it didn't matter. I could get whatever I wanted, that sense of, popularity. I was so good
What
at
would
it.
you say was a turning point for you?
So I I started to realize, um, I'd say within the last year of my gambling, without a doubt, um, that I became a liar. I became a master manipulator. And then eventually, it led me to steal money that I was entrusted with through my fire department. Um, I didn't take a treasurer position too because I had a gambling problem. Like it wasn't a problem to me, at that time. I just it just came all together when I finally got caught. I had stolen money for over a year and a half and it was under the radar. I didn't have anyone to answer to. I just, I didn't have to check in with anyone. It was nothing for me to be playing all night on my phone when I'm supposed to be working. Playing all night on my phone, 7 o'clock in the morning, I get off and I drive to Atlantic City to collect the money, couple hundred that I want. I never was ahead. I never, I can honestly say, like, wherever I gambled, I don't think I ever left with more than I ever came with, that I ever went with.
And now that you're in this recovery journey,
Yes.
what would you say has been the biggest challenge for you? And once you identify that this was a challenge, how did you overcome that challenge?
So I think the one tough issue that I faced is how can anything make me feel the way gambling action did? If I was stuck and we're down the road now, but that thought can still creep in. I'm not healed from triggers. There'll be a time that I'm bored or I'm not doing anything and it'll cross my mind. Oh, you remember when like replacing, you know, replacing the healthy stuff. So now I know what makes me happy now. Okay. I know that there's other things to do with my time. And so my last bet was December 16th of 2017. That was it for me. And it also turned out to be the day that I was being investigated for theft. So I woke up that day thinking I was going to be spending the day in Atlantic City with my girlfriends. We were going to have a great time out. And when I woke up, that's when, that's when it started to hit me. It was that day that I meant so much. And But that was definitely one of the toughest issues was what am how am I going to feel that way again, as well as what that day ended up bringing.
I mean, and now you have had, so many years in successfully in recovery. Has there been any moments that were like surprising for you in the past 8 years?
Oh, absolutely. There definitely have been. So, a big point, and I tell this when I'm bringing up my story. A big turning point was there was going to be a lot of embarrassment and shame that I was facing. And that day, when I placed my last bet, it was, a matter of time when it kind of like hit me like, you're in a lot of trouble. Like, this isn't good, and you have a lot of people to tell. You're going to let down a lot of people if you do this. And so that's when it entered my mind that I wasn't going to wake up that next day. I was leaving Atlantic City that day and I was going home and I was ready to end it all. And I want to face it. I wanted to hit that easy button, and it wasn't until, of course I get into recovery that I'm like, oh, I understand why I'm feeling that way. And a big part of my recovery was connecting on a spiritual level, and I believed, the universe, whatever my intervention was that night, it was being reminded of a time that I felt that same way that I felt that night, like ready to just end it. And I was reminded. And then the next step that I made was huge when I got home that night.
One of the things that we have spoken about here in this space is the fact that gambling disorder does have the highest rate of suicide than any addiction. And now here you are talking about, that once you were in some of the deepest, most desperate times that this came to your mind.
Yep, it absolutely did. And so going home with that intention, having a moment, I like to call it, when we think about the word accountability, I like to call it the A. I learned the letter A that night and took everything in, made sure that, I was going to breathe. I had my two little dogs with me, and I looked down at them and I was like, okay. And so then I did something that completely surprised me, and I picked up the phone and I called the helpline.
Which helpline was that you called?
I called 1-800-GAMBLER. I sure
You
did.
know, you have an inspirational story here because here you are, what you went through. You call 1-800-GAMBLER,
Okay.
seeking for help.
Yep.
Did you receive the help that you need by calling the 1-800-GAMBLER?
It was to date the best decision I ever made in my life, without a doubt. Because as
Can you
soon as
elaborate
I
on that?
Yep, absolutely. So as soon as I called, and mind you, when I called, like to me, 1-800-GAMBLER was for like, people who had a lot of money. That wasn't me. I was just go to have fun. It was just a fun thing till it wasn't. Um, I didn't know if they were, going to give me the money. I didn't know. Like, are they going to get me a help with a lawyer because I was facing these charges that were serious? And, so I just had all these, things. But I called, and when the woman answered the phone, I was very, upset. The woman who answered the phone was amazing. She was very kind. The first thing that she did was she gave me hope right away. She said, I didn't know what I could talk about. I had no idea. But when I reached out, the first thing she said was, you're not alone. I can tell you, from experience, she had kind of gone into the fact that, she had some experience with it, that my situation, um, not that it wasn't unique, but the fact that I made the right decision for calling, and she gave me a little bit of her story, which made me feel comfortable to know right away I'm not alone. So
Did you
as
feel
the call,
supported?
what'd you say?
Did you feel supported?
Oh, I absolutely did. Absolutely did. And then what was going to come next is, um, she went into the help meetings. Now, this was a Saturday night, you know, um, before Christmas, no, and it was, she proceeded to basically like give me the information and said, I know where this room is. I have attended this and, I know this meeting. And she said, these are going to be good. And I said, okay. And at this time, I didn't go on a website. I didn't even know if that was available then. And I was writing everything down. Like I had a pen and paper and a bunch of tissues. And I'm just writing everything down. Like I was, okay. Wrote all that information down. And the next thing she did was she said, okay, I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you some numbers now. I'm going to give you some names and phone numbers. And I said, okay. And she said, these are for licensed counselors. And I was like, okay, but I'm a big fat first responder, And it's okay, well, if something's going on in my head, that means there's something wrong with me, mentally. And that was always a stigma, in the field that I was in. Forget it. So I was like, I was a little hesitant and, kind of threw it out there like, well, I'm not going to have health benefits. What good, I'm doing that addict thing of saying, well, this isn't going to work for me. I had that addict mind of looking for any excuse to not get this help. And not so many words, she pretty much said, checkmate, Christine. She said, I'm giving you information for treatment providers that we at this number provide to you. Means a last resort. She went through the whole thing, but our treatment plan, the treatment plan here. So I said, okay. I said, all right. And I stuck with it and I took the names down. And that following, after I got done the phone call with her, she gave me everything that she could. She made herself available and told me other options in case I needed anything before. And that conversation with her actually let me make that next phone call, which was to my family. They were all together in one place. I called my brother and I let him break the news, and, there was an email that went out to other family because this was going to be in the newspaper. My mess up was going to be in the newspaper and I really didn't want my family having to find out that way. But it was, the hope and the support that one phone call gave me that led me to go and be able to do this, to let my family know and bring it to the surface and start being accountable for what happened.
Do you believe that having a strong support, especially with loved ones, is one of the reasons why you have been able to be so successful in your recovery journey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A big part that, I was able to make an appointment with the first, therapist that number she gave me. I was able to make an appointment with that person. And me coming clean about something that I had been hiding, and I really did hide it well because none of them had any idea. It has made my relationships with my family stronger, family members stronger than I ever imagined. Stronger than I ever imagined. It was the ones that I thought would, not for lack of a word, disown me, that stepped up, through my whole journey to help me out. Because, I was facing some serious stuff. So, yeah.
A little while back, you said something about, me being a big bad first responder.
Yeah.
We know that addiction does not discriminate.
Doesn't.
Okay. However, we know that certain jobs, certain career choices that people make does make them more susceptible to addiction. First responders, are most susceptible to addiction, more particularly this type of addiction. What is it you think of is about the culture of a first responder that can lock a person into a mindset where they're like, okay, you know what? I can't declare that I have a problem here.
It's
What is it that about that culture that you
I,
believe makes it stigmatizing for someone
yeah, I
to come
mean,
forward?
it's kind of like it's the embarrassment, it's shame, it's, that big part of it. Like knowing what I know now, after coming into recovery, and then, my therapist leading me to go get mental health, go see a mental health professional and, getting all that. If I had done that, say, 10 years prior, if that was the case, I wouldn't have ever had the jobs. They look at that as a weakness, you know, things like that are weaknesses. You don't have problems, and it's just you have to have this persona, I think, and I've worked with, all kinds of people, different things that they've gotten attached to different things, and I think it's just the stress of the job. Like put it out of your mind.
Plus, you're the one that people come to for help.
Right. Yep. That
Talking about
was
help,
fun.
what is it that you do now?
Right now, I
Yes.
am a prevention specialist with 1-800-GAMBLER.
Well,
Yeah.
you are in Jersey.
Yes.
What's the company that you work for?
I work for the Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey.
And what is it that you do there? Because it's incredible. You do have a inspirational story. Here you are, you find yourself stuck in an addiction. You were active in an addiction.
Yes.
You realize that you need help. You call an entity that is there to help you,
It's
and then you end up working for that entity.
yes.
How does that feel for you now?
It's honestly, it's amazing. Look, it to me, it's not a job. Okay? It's not. I love this. I am passionate about it. I know it works, you know. It might not be every piece of it, but I know that what the resources that are provided through here, I know they work. And, sharing that experience is it's so rewarding. It really is. My best recovery, and I've been through, all different stages and, you know, going to the help meetings and having to go it alone. Um, it's the best when I can go into a presentation, which is what we do. The fact that I'm public speaking, still, I have trouble, like, I can do it, obviously. Um, I can. It's a long way, but when I'm finished and I'm vulnerable enough to tell my story, it's making me honest. I don't have anything to hide. This is what happened. This is how it worked out. And I don't like going and telling everybody. I don't like saying, if I can do it, you can do it. Like I don't believe in that. What I try to do is let my audience know, or let these other people that are struggling, whether it's whatever addiction it is, let them know they don't know how important their story is going to be. Tell it. Don't be afraid. You could be helping the person next to you. And I know it's hard, but at the end, when they come to me and they're like, "Yeah, thank you for sharing that, or the times that the people are like, I didn't even think I had a gambling problem, but now wait, this is making me think, especially when the correlation is, you don't think you're doing bad by putting something into your body, but now you're over here with scratch offs or, you know, you're trying to replace that. And I know firsthand because that was one of my biggest struggles. How do I replace that feeling when it's actually like, I don't have to, I don't have to.
Our society has normalized. Yeah.
Yes.
And the fact is, it's legal. there's nothing wrong with a person engaging in gambling. But one of the things that we have mentioned here, when we want a person to self-evaluate, okay, are they comfortable with the level of play? So what would you tell someone who may be where you were so many years ago? What are the signs that they should be looking for within themselves when they self-evaluate on whether they believe that they may have a gambling problem?
When it doesn't become fun anymore. When it doesn't become fun. You know, for me personally, it's always, even still now, you know, too much of a good thing isn't. It isn't. I know not for me, but it's kind of when you think about it, you know, um you have to know your limits. Um I think what gets me, you were saying about the normalization, and I think the hardest thing is, you know, the kids' exposure as opposed to my exposure at that age. It's totally different. And, just the fact that it's like, but you don't know what you're doing, you don't know, and it's like, I'm trying to show you, but everybody has to find their own way. And I just, the best advice is, not to give up on yourself, know that there's help, and that's, just catch yourself, you know, bring somebody with you, find someone you can trust. And if you don't think you can, give it a try anyway. Trust your gut in a lot of ways.
In this community, one of the things that we tell individuals, tell our audience, when it comes to responsible gambling techniques, is that not to gamble alone, or not to gamble with individuals who are of your mindset, to gamble with a family member who knows your financial situation, who may act as those eyes outside of you. Do you believe that something like that can help avoid a person falling into a problem gambling area?
I do, when I couldn't be accountable for myself, I didn't let anyone else be accountable for me, which was maybe some kind of discipline that I needed, you know. But we're gamblers, so we can hide it. We can hide it very well, and
Who
then
would you say is your biggest support system right now?
right now,
Yes.
without a doubt, it's my mom.
Okay.
You know,
So
um,
having her there has helped you.
currently,
Okay.
absolutely. That was a big thing for me. You know, Me and my mom had a relationship, but it wasn't strong. Not until way I was into adulthood, and I think it meant everything. She was there. My whole family was there, but my mom, she was like here, here. She helped me every step of the way. She didn't understand what was going on. My mom would be the last person that I'd think to go to about addiction, anything. And, there she was. She showed up. She made a lot of sacrifices during that time. The fact that she started, going to my counselor with me. And I remember after she found out, about a week later, I had to pick her up from the airport. She was coming back from her vacation, the rest of my family. And I remember picking her up at the airport. And that was probably the saddest, longest car ride I ever took. Um, and because all mom did was blame herself. She blamed herself. How did I not know? How could I not see this? I wasn't good. And I know that's always going to stick with me. It's always
Parents
going
in
to.
general tend to do that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And today she's my best friend. She's my biggest supporter.
Very
You
glad to
know,
hear that.
and yeah, and she's had things that she's overcome. You know, we work. you know, um, we work really hard, and you know, trying to we keep each other balanced. Let's put it that way. We keep each other balanced. I don't really. As far as that's concerned, I do find that my biggest support is when I'm in front of people bringing awareness about gambling. Telling my story, it helps me. Like that's like sharing in a meeting, or it's every time I share it, it's almost like a reminder to me to say, look where you are now, which I never thought I'd ever be here. And, so basically, 800 Gambler saved my life and set me on a path to a new one.
You mentioned the word healthy. How do you maintain a healthy balance in this journey of recovery for you?
I know myself. I know my limitations. I know like to trust what I'm feeling. I never could trust myself, and now I started to. And I know I'm still going to keep learning about myself. That's definite. Something I am all the time. I'm always empathetic. I think I've always had helping people in my mindset since I can remember. Another thing that really helped me was the fact that I got diagnosed. I had never seen a psychiatrist before I was 41. And to get diagnosed with mental conditions that maybe if they were addressed sooner, who knows? If they were caught sooner, it might have explained a little bit more. But it was nice being able to find that out and then find the correlation, you know, the correlation with what was happening to me. Why did I fall into this? And that mental aspect, I wasn't just finding out about this crazy addiction. I was finding out about these mental health things that they were saying I had. And I don't mind sharing, but I was diagnosed OCD. I was diagnosed bipolar 2, PTSD. I mean, I had 17 years of, 911 calls, fire calls, all of that on top of regular, growing up stuff. And being able to find all that out, connecting, it's kind of like when I connected 1-800 Gambler and, the council and said, oh, okay, how did these things fit? And then it just became, well, what can I do? What can I do? How do you know, I didn't even think I could work here.
And here you are.
Yeah.
So now that you are here,
Yes.
what would be a message that you can tell someone who may be, on the fence, and they may be struggling with problem gambling? What would your message to that person be?
Stay strong. Um, you know, you, you can find your strength. Okay. They take it one day at a time. Absolutely. I don't tell them that it's going to be peaches and cream, and, life shows up, but it's how you're going to deal with it. That, that makes all the difference. It's worth it. It's worth it. Give yourself a chance, just give yourself a chance and accept any help that you can find. And if it's not for you, move on, because there's going to be something else that you can find that will help you.
Ms. Christine, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
As I say, you do have an inspirational story. Uh, Stay strong. Just like the message you give an audience here. You stay strong, stay committed. You're doing very well. Keep doing the work that you're doing, because it's very
Thank
much
you,
appreciated.
1-800 Gambler.
Thank you.
Over and
And
over.
yes, thank you very much. Have a great day. That is our time for today. As I said, her story is one of inspiration and motivation. I would like to thank Miss Christine Palladino for being our guest today. And we hope that she can join us once again. And again, I thank you for being with us today. And remember, if you or someone you know may have a gambling problem or experiencing some sort of issues with problematic gambling behavior, give us a call. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter where you are in this great country of ours. Give us a call. We're here to provide support, treatment, and hope. And I will see you next time.